Good morning, everyone. My name is Teagan, and I started coming to Lakeside just last year. I grew up in a religious family that regularly attended church. I was baptized as a baby, and I grew up in a house that taught me about God. As a young child, I believed in God, but of course, since I was so young, my understanding of God was limited. I was yet to form a deep relationship with Him. When I was 9 years old, a seed of doubt was planted into my mind when I came across a YouTube video that was titled, "How to Tell Your Kids God Isn't Real." Never before in my life have I really questioned the existence of God, but this video, for one of the first times in my life, made me think about the possibility that there isn't really a God. In the next 7 years of my life, I went from believing in God and Christ to doubting His existence to eventually losing any and all belief in Him. I remember many times when I would pray that if God was really there and was listening to my prayer, that He would prove it to me and remove the doubt from my mind. At the time, I thought I received no answer to these prayers, when in reality, I was deaf to Jesus knocking on my door. I started to take secular theories on the origin of the universe and life that we were taught in school, not as theories, but as facts. In my perspective at the time, it didn't just seem like it was possible that there wasn't a God, but it seemed like it was impossible for there to be a God as He was shown in the Bible. I was completely lost, and I never thought I could come back. That was until I finally heard Jesus knocking on my door. This didn't come at a time where I expected it. I had fully atheistic views for a couple years by this point in my life. I thought that even if there was a God, I was too far gone. I wrongfully thought it was too late for me. But God didn't forget me, and He never did. I was just unable to hear Christ knocking. For the first time in my life since I was 9 years old, I finally heard Jesus knocking when my friend Becca Beyer invited me to Lakeside's youth group kickoff. I decided to go, mostly for Becca's sake, and I never would have expected the change in my life that this day would eventually lead to. I had a good time, and I met for the first time some amazing people who God would eventually use in my life to save me. After that night, I was curious why the people here believed what they do. And deep down, I felt a desire to give Jesus another chance in my life. So despite still being very skeptical, I decided to join the youth group, and this ended up being the best decision that I've made in my life. It was through the youth group and the people involved at the church that God was finally able to reach me again. After years of being estranged, God brought people into my life and used them to save me. Amazing people at this church, like Becca Beyer, Abby Sander, Chris Silver, Tony O'Toole, and more, played a much larger role in my salvation and walk with Christ than any of them probably realize. Chris Silver in particular was very helpful in understanding of the questions and doubts that I had, and was very helpful in explaining to me in a way that made sense, like an explanation for these questions. He also helped give me the resources that I needed to answer any other questions or confusions that I had. God also used people who were already in my life. I can't thank my parents enough for how supportive they were in my walk with Christ. Or they have been. Over some time, one by one, the doubts I had were relieved, the questions I had were answered, and ideas that I'd never considered before were revealed to me. One day I came home after youth group, and I realized that I believed everything that I was being taught. I recognized that I was a helpless sinner, and that there was no way for me to make myself presentable to God on my own. So I prayed. I prayed that I knew I was a sinner, and that through Christ, my sins would be forgiven. And I thank God for being so merciful and so loving that He didn't allow me to stay lost. From there, the changes in my life became evident. Since my salvation, my life has changed for the better in many ways that I did not expect. Out of love for God, I began to shape my life how God has commanded me to. These changes that I brought into my life have made me happier, and they've made me a better person. My faith has brought me a greater peace and understanding of life, which has been very beneficial to me. I've started to notice areas of my life where God is working, and I've never felt more in touch and more heard by God than I do now. I've had family members and friends tell me about how they can see that God has worked in my life to change me for the better. and I'm very excited to continue to learn and apply more of Christ's will in my life. For me, getting baptized today is the next step to follow the Lord in obedience and publicly share my love for God. In Revelations 3:20, Jesus said, "Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come into him and eat with him, and he with me." So I encourage anyone here who has heard the knocks of Jesus to go and answer the door, because it will change your life.